and welcome. My name is Robin Andrew Stamper. I am the Artistic Director and Chorus Master for the Straz Center's Opera Tampa. And I'm here to speak with you about our upcoming 2025 main stage season. I'm absolutely thrilled to have two special guests to join me to help illustrate what our season is about. We begin with Melissa Meisner, who is joining me today. Melissa is our artistic administrator. She is our resident stage director and a wonderful performer unto herself. She's stage directing our Don Pasquale, and she is performing the role of the old lady in our production of Candide. Now, some of you who went to see our Sweeney Todd remember Melissa as Mrs. Lovett, and you know what kind of tour de force of an actress that requires. So Melissa, how are you today?
Thank you, I'm very well. Thanks for having me here.
Excellent. We're here for another great season, two of which actually are Opera Tampa premieres, Don Pasquale and Candide. And we're also building the sets for those two operas, which is especially exciting for us. We begin 2025 with our production of Candide. And Melissa, like I said, is playing the old lady who is an integral character in the show. So the story of Candide was actually written by Voltaire. Do you care to expound?
Sure. So Voltaire was a philosopher in the Enlightenment period in the 1700s, late 1700s, and he actually wrote the novel or novelette of Candide as a rebuttal to another well-known philosopher at the time, Leibniz. His philosophy was that if we believe in God and God is the best of all possible gods, then the world that he created has to be the best of all possible worlds. And basically, Voltaire's rebuttal to that philosophy, which was widely accepted at the time, was this very searing, satirical look at the world. And it really is a denunciation of human goodness, you know, of that philosophy that we are all in this best scenario. And he shows it by showing just the worst parts of humanity. And so we have this very, you know, this silly character who is an optimist, and Voltaire is showing how silly optimism is and how futile optimism is. And so we have Candide, who goes through all of these experiences that just sort of compound that human beings are pretty terrible.
It would jade him, basically.
Exactly.
But by the end of the opera, however, he essentially is saying, you know, life is challenging, but we try to make the best of, there's a piece called The Best of All Possible Worlds in there, and that's what I think Candide's ending sentiment is.
Yes, he decides, you know, I'm just going to focus on my own garden, and I'm going to focus on farming and just living a simple life, and that's sort of the ending sentiment. Yeah, he's not going to. He's done with philosophy, I think, at that point, and he just tries to live his best life.
So despite all the negativity through the opera, we actually end up lifted up as an audience as well, with that rousing Make Our Garden Grow, which is a certainly spectacular piece.
Really beautiful.
Yeah. So you play the role of the old woman.
That's right.
Yeah. So how does her character fit into the story?
So she is really another depiction of just how horrible Voltaire's opinion of humanity is. She points out sort of the hypocrisy of the church, being the daughter of a pope, allegedly, and having the sort of horrible experience after horrible experience with her life. And another point that Voltaire is making with the old woman is the hypocrisy of duty, right? So she was basically enslaved by a military outfit that decided that they were starving to death, and they decided that it was against their personal oath to the military that they would murder women and children. So instead of murdering them, they decided to eat parts of them to keep them alive. And actually, so the old woman has one buttock because she's had this experience of having half of her buttock or half of her butt
Cannibalized.
eaten. And it's basically the reason for that, and from Voltaire's perspective, is to show how silly it is to make that kind of an oath when, the actual, brutality that they performed on these women was a worse fate than death had they just killed her. So she's pretty, but she's not jaded, right? She's in there. She's just making it work, which is another sort of sentiment, I think, from Voltaire about life and how things go bad, but you just gotta make it work.
Well, there's so many complicated aspects of the plot. How important do you think it is that the audience can come away from a performance of Candide and get all of those aspects?
Who knows if they're going to, but we have Bernstein's music, and we have just wonderful melodies on top of melodies, which is the thing that I love so much about his music. It's exciting and timeless and interesting. And so, if you're not having that sort of satirical outlook of optimism, maybe it's just sort of bad thing after bad thing that happens in the story for you. But if you're maybe not an optimist, maybe you'll get the point a little bit more.
So the old lady's hit tune is called "I Am So Easily Assimilated," and way back when, our Opera Tampa singers would do various outreach gigs, and you learned "Easily Assimilated" for those gigs.
At your request, I learned that song.
So I get credit,
yes.
Right? And now here you are performing the whole role.
Yes, very
What is that
exciting.
about when you say you're easily assimilated? Now, the story of Candide progresses through all sorts of different locales throughout the world. Does that have a connection to the song itself?
Definitely. The old woman sort of helps to guide Candide and Cunegonde along their journey. And because they're going to so many different locations, she's sort of showing them that it doesn't matter where we go. We're going to figure it out. We're going to work it out in this scenario. And she becomes Spanish within half an hour. That's the text in the song. I'm suddenly Spanish, and she has influence over the Spaniards in Cadiz, and she thrives no matter where she goes. And that's sort of the point.
So as a performer, and as a performer of Bernstein's music, what do you find to be some of the greater challenges? Do you find it tonal music? Is it easy to sing, or?
Yeah, the solo certainly is easy enough, but some of the ensemble pieces, as I mentioned, what Bernstein does, he sort of stacks the melodies. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of have to find your way among the texture, the wonderful texture of all the layers of music. And because I am a lower voiced character, I often have the harmony notes. And so the melody, while we all know the melody and it's beautiful, sometimes those harmony notes are a little bit funky to find. And so you kind of have to create your own new melody in your head. So it's a bit of a challenge.
Yes, and getting to know the score more and more, I find that some of the vocal writing is actually instrumental with its leaps and whatnots. Now, what about, okay, so your character, she is originally from where? And what does that mean for you practicing an accent?
Well, so it's she says that she's from a place called Rovna Gurbania, and she talks about her father being Polish, or High Middle Polish is what she says. But because she is this character that goes from place to place and has been to many places throughout her journey, while I do have to have some kind of an accent, it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific accent that exists, which is pretty freeing.
I was going to say, so that that rationale is liberating a bit, isn't it?
It gives me the opportunity to make the accent amusing, maybe, and it doesn't necessarily offend anybody in particular, because it's not going to be one that actually exists. So it's going to be Polish leaning, but I'm going to try to make it as funny as I can, because it's comedy, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the big challenges, actually, of producing a work like this is that it is in so many different locations. I was reading that in one of the productions, there's so many versions of Candide. Actually, it was first presented in 1956, correct?
Yes.
And then the first time it was performed as an opera was at the New York City Opera in 1982. And I couldn't possibly tell you how many different versions there are. Ours is 1999, which was actually a music theater version, but all opera singers in our cast. And you were mentioning about how maybe it's a little less offensive in some ways.
It is a satire and a commentary about human beings and our behavior.
Yeah.
And so it is offensive, just innately,
It was supposed to be.
Exactly.
That was the point.
Exactly.
In many ways.
Exactly. But yeah, so there have been, I want to say, 5 versions of the story.
With tweaks.
The Bernstein version, yeah.
With the tweaks.
Yeah, and so this one does have less of the more unsavory bits mostly about women. There's a lot of disparaging, which is common for our art form, right? We have often things that we need to try to give women agency in these stories, because in the time period, of course, women didn't have agency. So so this one is a little bit more watered down in that regard.
As the artistic director for Opera Tampa, I had some trepidations in terms of producing Candide. It's very, very complicated. We've come up with a great design for the set that can change very quickly from setting to setting, but it's even more complicated than that. The story's complicated, the music is complicated, because we're dealing with a show, basically an operetta in a sense, because there's a lot of dialogue. It requires a lot of choreography. What else would you say is so difficult about producing this
Because we
sort of
go
show?
from location to location to location, and each one of those locations requires, people that live in that location, or, whatever have you, a small chorus of this location, and then the very next scene is another small chorus of another location. So, the way the ensemble has to move around and change costumes and go from scene to scene, it's you got to have a spreadsheet for this. I mean, it is very.
We do.
It's very confusing and complex, and so we're lucky to have a really great team to put it together, because it can be just a very messy process with as many different elements that we have, that each scene demands, and they're not long scenes necessarily. I mean, it is literally back to back to back to back. These all these elements need to be completely different, and if this person is in this scene, then they can't be in the next scene, but they can be in the following scene. And is this person somebody that can dance? Well, then they can't be in this scene because they have to be in this scene. And so
exactly.
it is just it's a lot of working and figuring out how to make that work, and hopefully, everybody that says they want to be in the show are still going to be in the show by the time we get there.
It would be very fascinating to watch what goes on backstage for a show like this, because it is so complicated.
Well, and the detail that those same designers and technicians have to have, I mean, in the meetings, it's like, well, is he gonna put this hat on in the scene, or is he gonna put the hat on before the scene? And if he puts the hat on in the scene, then I need to know exactly what his look is before and after. I mean, it is just there's a lot involved in every little detail, and there's so many little details in Candide.
And more responsibility for all of the individual performers, including the ensemble, to know what they should be wearing and how they should be acting. Well, and also part of the complexity of Candide is there are so many different characters, right? And like we said, sometimes a single cast member will have 4 different characters that they have to portray, and yet the cast is still large. We have 12 different principals, for instance, in Candide, plus an ensemble, all of whom are playing various characters. Don Pasquale is a little bit smaller, which is a relief. There's still a chorus, but there are only 4 principals in Don Pasquale. La Boheme, there are 8 principals, I believe, and a chorus, a very, very, very large chorus.
I want to say 40-ish plus.
Yeah.
But that's not even including all the people that are working on the opera that you don't see. I mean, of course, we have the pit musicians, and depending on the orchestration, there, we have so many musicians in the pit, but we also have of course, our set designer and our lighting designer and our hair and makeup designer and our costume designers, but all those people have a team of people working with them to make everything happen. And of course, we have the crew of carpenters and electricians, and it takes an army to put these shows together. And that's, I think, what makes it such a grand art form.
And yet we don't want the audience, while they're watching, to know all of that. Because what they shouldn't be conscious of what goes into an opera. It's great if they know, as a secondhand piece of knowledge, but when you go into the theater, you need to be watching a show and enjoying the music and enjoying the singing and enjoying the story, and leave a lot of that magic to all of these people that you're talking about that you will never see. When discussing the music of Candide, the most important thing to remember, it is Leonard Bernstein from beginning to end. Now, probably the most performed piece is the overture, which, ironically or not, it's the only piece of the entire score that Candide orchestrated. He wrote it all, but he only orchestrated the overture. The two most popular operas, very, very popular, is Glitter and Be Gay. But I've actually chosen as my major selection of this montage, I Am Easily Assimilated. This is the old lady's song. And to me, the whole notion of assimilating is representative of all the different scenes. And also with this number, you get the idea that there are a lot of dance numbers in the show as well. Obviously, we need a choreographer. Big dance number. Our second production is Donizetti's Don Pasquale. Now, I would say Don Pasquale has three frequently done comic operas. One is The Daughter of the Regiment, another is Elixir of Love, which you have stage directed before, and then Don Pasquale. Now, having been the stage director for Elixir and now for Don Pasquale, why would you say Elixir is performed more, at least in this country? Because Don Pasquale is absolutely delightful, and I find the characters in a way even more interesting, a little less simple. I mean, everybody can read in Don Pasquale.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really interesting question because, of course, at the time, Don Pasquale was sort of what we would call a blockbuster, right? It was written because Donizetti was already very popular, and it was written for singers that were extremely popular. They were the biggest name singers at the time, and so it was a great big hit at the time. And Elixir, it's a little bit more, I would say, even more convoluted. It seems like the characters do dumb things in both Elixir and in Don Pasquale, but you can sort of understand why the characters are doing what they're doing in Don Pasquale. With Elixir, it's perplexing. There's some strange happenings, but ultimately both operas are sort of about a transformation, which is a really cool thing. And both operas have, of course, the Commedia dell'arte characters.
Melissa is a specialist in Commedia dell'arte.
I wish I was a specialist. But
she could find Commedia characters in Tosca.
Well,
right?
no, that's not.
Maybe the sacristan.
But it was basically the vehicle for comedy at the time, and so always with these opera plots from the Victorian era, we have Commedia characters, and just like that, Elixir, we have the doctor who is sort of the driving force of the change that happens in that story. In Don Pasquale as well, the doctor character, that's
Malatesta.
Malatesta,
Yes.
is sort of the driving force, the sort of orchestrator of the happenings.
All the mischief, yeah.
That's right. But what's nice about the Commedia characters and how it lines up with the Don Pasquale characters is that we have, of course, Colombina, who in Elixir is Adina, and in our story, Don Pasquale, she's Norina. And what's nice about Commedia and how that lines up with Don Pasquale is that in Commedia, although that character is a maid and has very little resources and very little power, she's also the smartest of the characters. And so
così.
that's right. And so that gives her power, even though she has low status. And so likewise, in Don Pasquale and in Elixir, we have this character who is a low status female, but has actually given herself power by being the smarter one. And she, that gives her some agency. And that sort of fits perfectly in with the Commedia characters. So yeah, I can't say why Elixir is done more often. I don't know.
I've always preferred Don Pasquale. I just
okay.
somehow find the characters
Yeah,
more
it makes more
interesting.
sense, really, I think. It makes more sense. Elixir, it's like, why are they doing this? You know, it doesn't really, their motivations are really hard to pin down. But Don Pasquale, it's clear, the plot is a little clearer.
Yes, and actually I find some similarities in Don Pasquale with the Barber of Seville also, because Figaro is the instigator of all the shenanigans, who is the baritone, as in Malatesta. And then there's the grumpy old man who's wealthy and stingy and, was trying to marry somebody.
That Pantalone
a
is that
third
character.
his age, and getting foiled at the end.
Well, we see these same characters over and over again, even they have different names. But yes, we see these, they're archetypes, right? They're archetypes. So Don Pasquale is that same character that you were just describing, which in Commedia dell'arte is called Pantalone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and it's actually a story that it could occur in, it doesn't have to, Don Pasquale was written to take place in the early 18th century. But that kind of story can apply to other centuries as well. And that leads me to the very interesting fact that we are setting Don Pasquale in the 19th century Prohibition era in Ybor City, which should really entice a lot of you folks out there who are considering coming to see the opera, because we've all been to Ybor.
It's exciting on a bunch of levels. First of all, because it is our community and our home and our history that we're employing. But because it is, we're talking about just 100 years prior to now, we can sort of recognize that, I remember I said it's about transformation. So we can sort of recognize more readily the transformation from maybe the Victorian era, which is coming right before our time period, to that sort of Art Deco scene that happens in the 1920s. And so we can have a visual representation of that transformation that maybe we connect with more than we would have, if it was 200 years ago, which is when it was originally written. So yeah, it really works well for the storytelling too.
Right, and you don't have to change anything about the plot to make it relevant to the early 19th century, or do you?
Well, what's exciting about it is that because we have our own history here in Ybor City of that time, Norina, as I mentioned, is sort of low status female. So in translating that, she's working class. And so in 1925, in Ybor City, a working class woman would have worked in a cigar factory. So we have her, and the fact that she opens her scene the first time we see her, she's reading a book.
Yes.
So we have...
like Adina, right?
Yes, exactly. Women can read, amazing,
yes,
right? So she's reading a book, and so I thought it would be a really cool idea if she was inside the cigar factory as el lector. If you don't know what el lector is, in our cigar factories here in Ybor City, we had the cigar factory workers would pay someone to read the newspaper to them, but also classics, novels and lots of, just whatever entertaining things to while they're working all day rolling cigars. So I'm giving a little nod to an actual real life lector. There was actually only one female lector in our history, Luisa Capetillo. She was a real life person. She lived probably about 20 years prior to our time period, so it's really just a nod to her. But she was very progressive. She wore pants. She actually got arrested for wearing men's clothing. She was a labor organizer because the way she did that was by reading the newspaper to the cigar factory workers, and because of that influenced the local politics for the people in Ybor City. And so it's nice because we have this strong character of a woman who has her own agency, and while she doesn't have a lot of status or money, she does have power because she is educated, she's educating others. And that really gives our character of Norina a really good, strong standpoint for our story. And so it just sort of fit in perfectly with our own history, which is exciting.
And I think it's really cool that we and you are working with our one remaining cigar factory.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, so the J.C. Newman Cigar Company has not only the last remaining cigar factory in Ybor City, but it's actually the last remaining cigar factory in the country. And so as soon as as soon as the second to last one closed their doors, they opened their doors in order to preserve the history. And they created a wonderful museum there, and you can go and check out the history of cigar making in Ybor City and see how they do it now, but also how they did it, in the 30s, and then also how they did it in the late 1800s. And so they've been a really wonderful resource for us.
Imparting their knowledge on how to roll cigars, is my understanding.
I highly recommend go to the J.C. Newman Cigar Factory tour because it's really enriching.
That is so cool. And you've been our set designer, Tom Hansen. You've been working with him on the set. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's really cool because, I kind of come in with my ideas of this is what I need to happen. I need this door here. I need this furniture here. And he comes back with things, not only the requirements that I asked for, but he comes back then with, well, we could do this and we could do this, So it's really wonderful working with him, and it's just special. Normally we have to rent the sets, and this way we can just sort of tailor it to exactly the story we want to tell, how we want to tell it. And he's so creative and so talented. It's just wonderful collaborating with him. And he has been on the Cigar Factory tour with me, so he's got some inspiration for that from that event. So it's going to be great. I'm excited.
I'm excited. So Melissa and I actually I'm conducting Don Pasquale, Melissa's stage directing, and we've only collaborated on our main stage season, but it was 2022, was that right, for the Pirates of Penzance, which was also an original set. And this will be the second time, so I'm really excited to work with Melissa. While we're staging Don Pasquale, presenting it in the early 19th century, it's still Donizetti, and the music is still 18th century music, which means there's a lot of bel canto style, which means the orchestra plays very simple music to support a beautiful melody of the singer. That's Norina's aria while she's reading her book. And also it's very classical in a sense, in its structure. So this excerpt I'm going to play for you now is a chorus excerpt, and they're all singing about the commotion that has been caused, this is in the third act, by Norina being in the house and being an absolute terror, and nobody knows which end is up. So the last opera in our season is Puccini's La Bohème. I mean, what can you say about La Bohème that you haven't heard already? It's so beautiful. It's Puccini, who wrote some of the most beautiful and theatrical music of any opera composer. Do you feel like the story has influenced our culture or our culture in general, or what is it that makes this story so compelling, especially even in today's culture? Because, you know, it was also turned into a Broadway musical called Rent. So if you've seen Rent, it's the same story. So it's pertinent through not just one time period.
We see the story a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I would venture to say it might be a trope, because it is very similar to, like, say, An Affair to Remember, you know, this, or even La Traviata, right? Like, we have sort of this love affair, this pure, beautiful love, where, you know, she knows she doesn't have long, so she doesn't want to burden him with that pain, so she just sort of disappears. Him not knowing why, you know, that sort of thing. It really just makes us long for him to know the truth about her situation so that he can comfort her. And it's just one of those things, you know, we want them to be together, but they can't be together, you know. So it brings us in that way. And a lot of stories are similar.
La Traviata.
Right, exactly. If only he knew the truth that she won't tell him, you know. And so we have that. It just forces the audience to sort of have that longing for their reconciliation, and Puccini does not disappoint. I mean, obviously that music is timeless and gorgeous, and it's not to be missed.
Puccini is the ultimate opera theatrical composer. It's very, very expressive. It's very accessible, and it's very. It represents the verismo style very well. Verismo means realistic, and that means human. And his music breathes like humans breathe. Probably the most famous of all the arias is Musetta's Waltz. But I feel what represents the opera the most is the duet between Mimi and Rodolfo. So they have just fallen in love at first sight, and when they begin to exit from the first scene to go to the second scene, which is at the Café Momus, this is their exit music, and you can hear the undulation and the throbbing of the emotion. How can you not love that music? Melissa and I are now joined by another great artist that works for the Straz Center, and here to explain how he has helped our season come to life. It is Randy Gilmore. You see his beautiful work even before the curtains open on our stages. So, Randy, what is your title, and what exactly does that mean?
My title here at the Straz is Creative Director, and in simple terms, I'm head of the graphic design department. But overall, really, it is my task to sort of oversee everything we do on a visual level for the Straz, meaning anything that's in print, digital, web stuff, really our branding, how we present ourselves to the world, to kind of have an overview of all of that.
So you've been very deeply involved with our vision for each of our productions. Now, every creative team has a different vision. What has been the process in terms of getting our vision, Melissa's and mine, and Tom's vision, the creator of the sets, and getting that in the visual advertising?
You know, I find it very interesting. When I came here about 3 years ago, I'd never really done anything opera-related. I came from another performing arts center and was very familiar with this whole process, but we didn't do opera there. So when I came here, the previous creative director who was leaving turned it over to me, and so it's a whole new game for me, and it's been absolutely wonderful. It starts with you, obviously, when you're deciding what shows you're going to do. And then Alessandra comes to me, who oversees everything for the marketing for opera. And what she'll do is put together a mood board of what she wants it to look like, what she has in her mind of where we're going to move forward to. We sit down, we discuss it, and then I start getting to work, sourcing things, looks, colors, feels, and I start putting sort of my interpretation of what she has presented to me together for her. It's a long journey, it is, and it changes many times over the course of many tries, and there's a lot of errors, and we go back and we relook at things, and you know, we'll say the color's not working, or we don't like this font, you know, or this isn't the feel that we wanted, and we need to shift a little bit more. And as we go through that process, it actually starts to take shape of how we're going to sort of present this look to the outside world, because the graphics actually are the first thing, once you announce the titles, the graphics are the first thing that people see, and they need to reflect what these shows are and how you want, for lack of a better word, the emotion of them to start showing up.
One of the cool things I notice about our imagery is the actors, because every opera has a lot of themes to it, but there was one particular theme that it seemed per character that you wanted to represent. For instance, Candide. Tell us about Candide and what you were trying to represent from him and that character.
Well, my understanding, especially with Candide, is that the character is simple, shall we say, not idiotic, but just kind of naive to life, perhaps. The model that we used needed to be able to kind of display that look of not having a lot of experience to what the real world was out there. And what's interesting is these models that we get when they come in are not at all like the characters that we're shooting them as. And they completely transform for that shoot day. You know, they go through makeup and costumes and all that kind of stuff. And while we're shooting them, we're actually saying to them, okay, imagine this or have this look on your face or that kind of thing. And they're acting in a way. And so when we're choosing the photos, we are going through and saying, does this look portray the character? Is it the look that we want? Is it really, is his face showing this, you know, sort of naivete?
So what about Norina from Don Pasquale? What were you asking of her?
Norina actually, I think, was probably the model that transformed the most. When she walked in, I had no idea that she was going to be this vixen that they turned her into. Her hair was completely different. I mean, she just completely transformed, and we really needed her to have that sort of sexy and desirable and kind of sultry. We were very happy with her. It was just great working with her, and she was just loving every minute of it. She just loved being in that role. It was fun when they, you know, because in a sense they are, like I said, they are actors, so it's fun to see them transform and actually become the character and not, you know, their normal self. It's you know, when they kind of step into that role, it's a lot of fun to watch.
Now, were these professional models that you were dealing with?
No, Ali just finds the right people for the role. I mean, we're not going to an agency and hiring people.
Right. Well, which is one of the things I find so remarkable, is because you would look at these people and you would think that that's what they do for a living, and that's a testament to your work and what you and Ali are able to get from them.
Right.
So what about Mimi and La Boheme?
Mimi is actually a coworker of ours, and she's a stunningly beautiful woman. Mimi is a very tragic character, and we obviously needed her to be able to portray that. She needed very little makeup or transforming. We basically just put her in the dress and, you know, set the scene for her, and she was really able to just step into that pretty much as herself and show up as that. And she was the easiest, you know, to just kind of get that mood. It was a very easy one.
She came with that movie.
She did, yeah. It was a good choice, very good choice.
Everything about those images is wonderful, but of course the hardest part is choosing a person, especially someone who's not professional, and getting such emotion out of just a photograph.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of times because they're not professional, they come in and when they first get started, they're very nervous and very self-conscious of what they are doing and trying to kind of step into that role. But as it goes on, and it's a very long process, I mean, this takes an entire day and they're there for hours. So as it goes on, they start loosening up and they get comfortable, and then we really get the best shots out of them. You know, and there's a whole team of people around. There's photographers, there's makeup artists, costumes, everything. And it's can be a little overwhelming to people that haven't been involved with that before. It's a long day, but it's a lot of fun, so.
Melissa, you've been working with Tom Hansen, our set designer. What has that collaboration been like? And I'm curious about another aspect of the set, which is the turntable. Do you care to expound?
Sure. So like I said before, you know, I sort of go in with my list of requirements. So this story needs this sort of building, this story needs an outside space, this story needs an inside space. I need to have so many doors, you know, that kind of thing in order to tell the story. But then Tom is so creative and such an artist that, you know, he comes in with not only the requirements, but also the possibilities of what it could be and what it could look like to really enhance that storytelling. And while we were sitting there together in his office talking about what the scene changes needed to be, we decided on a revolve. So this is pretty exciting. We've never had, as far as I know, we've never had it before, where the entire set is basically on this pie. And we have a third of it is Don Pasquale's home, a third of it is the cigar factory that we're working so hard to make authentic, and then a third of it is their sort of outside space. And so rather than closing the curtain to change the scenery from scene to scene and asking the audience to wait quietly, we'll have instead just the scene changing right in front of our eyes as the set revolves around. So it's a pretty exciting concept for us. So I feel like it's gonna really keep this story going for the audience in a fresh new way. And yeah, Tom is just really great to work with. Lots of really great ideas to enhance the storytelling. I mean, there's so many things, you know. I mean, you know, I studied music and acting, and so that's sort of what qualifies me to be a stage director. But you know, you can tell a story with lighting. You know, the lighting designer is so important. You know, I mean, there's so many aspects of it, and then you know what Randy does really informs what we do too, which is just so wonderful. I want my work to stand up to the quality of Randy's work too. You know, and we want to support each other and enhance each other in what we're doing to make the best product possible.
So, Randy, you have this talent for taking other people's vision and bringing it to life through imagery. It's kind of personal question. What in your life has made you so good at this? And a little bit about your background and how you became who you are here at the Straz.
I think it's been years of working with other people. I've been doing this for a long time. Actually, my background, I started out in my youth, I was a ballet dancer and I was studying art in school. So I was already connected to theater and art. I took a very roundabout way to get where I am today, but I think I find it interesting that I did end up where I am, actually, that having been my original, you know, my starting point. I worked at another performing arts center before here for 14 years as the art director. And, you know, when you're young, you want to really take control of things. But through experience, you learn that it's so much better when you work with people and collaborate and let their talent shine through. And both of you kind of combine. You get such a much better project when you collaborate with people than when you just try to hold on to something tight and make it your own. That's actually kind of a joy of the design process and everything. I mean, I'm sure you both can agree that when you let other people's talents show up, the end product is so much better. So I kind of have learned that over the years to not try to be in control of everything, to just no ego anymore. You just forget the ego. If it's not working, let it go. And listen. You kind of have to listen to what other people are saying and take it into account. And the end product is really what we're all about. We really want to get that best thing of the collaboration of everybody together so that we can get the right thing created. And it's just been a process of getting there. You know, I did a lot of trial and error over the years and failed attempts, and you know, you learn, and that's the whole thing. You learn from your mistakes. You try to do it different the next time. And one of the beautiful things is working with Allie, because she is very open to my voice and what I say. I feel like we work beautifully together. It's really been a joy, and she, you know, she presents what she wants. She looks at what I'm coming up with. We kind of meld the two, and it all works out beautifully, I think. In the end, we get to where we want to be. You know, we don't always know where that is in the beginning, but in the end, we finally end up exactly where we want to be, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would say certainly as an artistic director, many of my best choices have been appropriated, shall we say.
Yeah.
Well, and then transformed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's some creative borrowing in there. So,
well, of course.
Well, and if everybody
course,
has sort of a say in what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
then that is going to shine through, right?
Right.
Their own
Yeah.
idea is going to be more passionate than, you know, sort of using someone else's idea.
Many voices are often better than
Yeah,
one.
I
so.
totally agree.
And it's stimulating. It's stimulating just to have conversations with other artistically minded people.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. I
so-
mean, it does stimulate the creative
Yeah.
process, you know, when you get other opinions and you take them in, and, you know, it just enhances everything.
So, as you, the audience, know, Opera Tampa, we do not present our productions. We produce them, which means everything starts from the ground up. And I think it's very, I'm actually curious, Randy, so what's the difference, you know, to work as a creative designer for Opera Tampa, who produces their shows, as opposed to maybe the Broadway series that presents?
And that's a great question, because they're two very different entities, completely different. You know, with Broadway, and I don't know if people really understand how that works, these are produced somewhere else, usually New York, wherever they are based. And when we bring those in-house, we're basically just presenting these shows. We're not producing them. We don't have any hand in them for any part of the creative process. For my role in that, what happens is these shows already have pre-made art that they are using to brand their shows. We get that, and it is our job to take that art and manipulate it, and sometimes Frankenstein it into how we need it. But even in doing so, we still have to send that back to New York for the show's approval. And, you know, they sometimes say, no, we don't like the way you're doing this. You have to do it this way, or move this, or make that smaller, or make this bigger. And it is very much a directive process from them. We don't get to have any say in it whatsoever. We're just basically their hand. With opera, that's 100% different. We're doing this all on our own. We're producing it. This is unique to us. It is, this is unique in the world, what we're doing right here. You're not going to see this. You're never going to see another opera based in Ybor.
That's right.
Yes,
Right?
maybe in the future, but right now, this is 100% us. And we're doing everything from the floor up. And so when audiences come, they're going to have that real feeling of, you know, this is a local event. You know, this is all done right here. This isn't some outside entity just pulling up in trucks and, you know, unloading and going on stage. We're doing this. We're, you know, every aspect of this, the costumes, the lighting, the sets, the performances, you know, the designs, all of that. This is us doing it right here, right now. Yeah.
So, Melissa, how important are these scenic and graphic design elements to what we do?
Well, it's all part of the storytelling, isn't it? What's really cool about our season, as I mentioned, you know, we're doing the Ybor City set in the 1925, and what's really cool is that we have this sort of very recognizable architecture from our own Ybor city with the red bricks and the archways. And those are things that if you live here, you know what that looks like. And so we're really using that in the set design. Tom is really using that in the set design to bring us into our own home back in that time period.
We've never produced Don Pasquale before, and it's a great piece, and I always wanted to, but you know, you look at the old 1800s versions of it, and they're charming in their own way, but we wanted to do something that was a little bit more relatable to our community and maybe a little bit more relatable to our time.
Well, and to honor, I think, our own history and the people that built our own community, and the people that still live here that are the ancestors of those people, you know. Of course, with Randy's help, we have these beautiful pieces of artwork in our brochure and our Bravissimo, which is basically a souvenir from the opera. It's not your average playbill, but instead a beautiful work of art. And Randy's bringing some of those elements in too, from Ybor City, those recognizable architectural.
Right, yeah. You know, Tom, the set designer, and I were referencing the same imagery and photos and came to the same conclusion with, you know, as you said, the brick is really the iconic Ybor, you know, the look of Ybor. And I also took, there's that famous, is it the Ybor Centro sign? The lettering that's in that, I've used that in some of the artwork, but something that I would point out is that, you know, for Don Pasquale, for the time period being in the 1920s, I think most people would go right towards that high Art Deco, Great Gatsby look. And that's not what this is. We're really trying to not just localize it, but also give that feel because of the cigar factories, that brick, and almost more of a speakeasy feel rather than, you know, the glamour Hollywood 1920s idea of what Art Deco was. We're not going there. This is real world, and location-wise, we really wanted to give that feel. I think that's wonderful that we're just doing it here. It's just, you know, using those elements that we already have in place so that people know it and recognize that this is something that's unique that we're doing, and it's really cool.
So everything about that production and what we do doesn't just begin when that curtain opens and you see on the stage. All of the advertising and resulting in our Bravissimo, it's all unified. It's all serving a purpose to represent a feel and a work of art.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're all coming together. If we're going from our perspective corners and coming in together with sort of the same thing to produce that.
Yeah.
That we really want that feel, and when people come to see Don Pasquale, they're going to say, I know where this is, I know where I'm at, this feels like home.
Yes, I think it's something that's unique with what we are doing here at the Straz Center.
Right, yeah. And that's what we want people to feel when they come here, is that they're coming home.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Randy, for joining us. And thank you as well. We look forward to seeing you at the opera.